Prepare for Parole and Reentry, is a non-profit dedicated to providing information about, materials for, and support with parole hearing preparation in Maryland. This video covers the mission of Prepare, gives an overview of the Prepare curriculum, and gives some information on volunteering to be a parole advocate. Prepare has grown out of the work of Mary Joel Davis. Mary Joel founded Alternative Directions in 1979 in Baltimore in order to provide civil legal services to incarcerated men and women. She also developed the Turnabout Program, an intensive reentry support program for women which had recidivism rates of just 5%. Upon retiring as Executive Director of Alternative Directions in 2009, she founded Second Chance for Women in order to provide support with parole hearing preparation to women incarcerated in the Maryland Correctional Institution for Women. My name is Elizabeth Finney. I am a co-founder of Prepare and one of OSI Baltimore's 2020 Community Fellows. For the past 2 years, I have been working with Mary Joel to scale parole hearing preparation support in Maryland because the need for such support goes well beyond the women's prison. There are 3 elements to the work of Prepare. Firstly, we develop, maintain, and keep up-to-date and relevant an online curriculum which guides people in a step-by-step way in preparing for parole hearings in Maryland. We do this because there is a lack of information both for people who are preparing for parole and for any family members and friends who are trying to assist them in preparing. Secondly, we work to bring the curriculum into prisons, recognizing that people who are incarcerated cannot simply access an online curriculum. Thirdly, we connect volunteer parole advocates with people who are seeking support. Those could be people who are incarcerated, or they could be their families who are working to help them. We do this because there is no public funding for support with parole hearing preparation in Maryland. The Prepare curriculum has been written with 3 groups in mind. Firstly, it is for incarcerated people who are preparing for parole hearings. Secondly, it is for their family and friends who are helping them to prepare. And thirdly, it is for volunteers who are helping them or supporting their family and friends in helping them. The Prepare curriculum is broken down into 4 units. Unit 1 is all about parole. Unit 2 is about the mechanics of parole in Maryland. Unit 3 is about how to put together a parole hearing in Maryland. And Unit 4 is about parole hearings and advocacy meetings in Maryland. Unit 1 is all about the many facets of parole. Subjects such as the history of parole, the philosophy of parole, and the politics of parole are covered. Unit 2, the mechanics of the parole system in Maryland, addresses questions such as who gets a parole hearing, what is the timeline, what kind of factors are considered in determining whether somebody should be granted parole. Unit 3 covers the details of how to put together a parole packet to include documents such as an introductory letter, a life story, a remorse statement, and a reentry plan. And Unit 4 covers parole hearings and advocacy meetings in Maryland, and that includes guidance for the parole advocates or family members who are undertaking a meeting at the Parole Commission, and guidance for people seeking parole on how to approach the parole hearing itself. Parole preparation is really best approached as a team effort. A parole advocate is someone who is helping another person make their best case for parole. A parole advocate could be a family member or a friend, or a parole advocate could be a volunteer who was previously unknown to the person seeking parole. Parole advocates do not need to have a background in law. It might be useful to have a background in law, but there's other backgrounds that could be useful as well, such as a background in social work or teaching or psychology. Parole advocates should, however, be comfortable with writing and with editing other people's writing. One important point to always keep in mind is that it is not the parole advocate whose life journey is at the center of the process.
the person seeking parole should be in the lead. This point may be particularly important to remember where a parole advocate is a family member or friend of the person who is seeking parole. So what does being a parole advocate actually entail? Well, Unit 1, all about parole. When you're learning that, you're simply accompanying someone on that journey towards a parole hearing. And that accompaniment goes on throughout all the units. In Unit 2, with the mechanics of parole in Maryland, you're helping that person in navigating the process, the nitty-gritty details of it. Unit 3, the parole packet. This is where the usefulness of a volunteer or a family member really comes in, because they can assist in putting the parole packet together with things like writing the life story or putting together the remorse statement. Another key role is in respect of the reentry plan, because people on the outside are in a good position to Google things and to make phone calls and to write emails in a way that people who are incarcerated aren't. And Unit 4, the volunteer parole advocate or the family member parole advocate can undertake an advocacy meeting at the Parole Commission, and the advocate will arrange that meeting and take the lead on the meeting. And the details of how to do that will be covered in Unit 4.
The time commitment of being a parole advocate. It can span a long period of time, a year or more, and if the person you're helping gets a rehearing, that is, they'll go back up for a parole hearing in a couple of years' time, then if you stick with them, it's going to last even longer than that. But most of the time, the work isn't hugely intense. Around the time that the parole packet is being finalised and the advocacy meeting is happening and the hearing is happening, it can be a little more intense. But generally speaking, if you allow for an hour a week for a year, let's say 50 hours, it's probably not going to be that much in total. The 50 hours isn't going to be equally spread. There'll be weeks with nothing to do, and there'll be weeks with more than an hour to do. But overall, that would be a reasonable time to budget for.
A point which we like to make at Prepare is to remind people that to prepare well for a parole hearing is to prepare well for reentry. There is huge overlap between these two things. And for this reason, even if a person has help with their parole hearing and doesn't get parole, that time hasn't been wasted. Nobody's time's been wasted on that, because a person is still better prepared for reentry than they otherwise would be. And in building a reentry plan as part of the parole packet, they will have built some bridges and made connections with the reentry world. And for this reason, one of the hypotheses that we are testing with the data that we collect is that preparing well for a parole hearing reduces recidivism. And beyond that, there is the transformational potential of parole. It's a ready-to-go institution which can be used to address the overuse of incarceration. It's an institution which can garner bipartisan appeal because it emphasizes the responsibility of the individual, but it also emphasizes the important role that the community should play in helping people to help themselves on their journey, and it also emphasizes the quality of mercy. Preparing well for parole encourages exactly the kind of future planning which makes people more likely to succeed on reentry.
Many people recognize that we, imperfect people that we are, have produced imperfect institutions, and that there is much room for improvement. A very concrete way to be the change we want to see is to serve as a parole advocate, which is to say, to help a fellow citizen make their best case for parole and to negotiate the challenges of planning a successful transition from prison back to the community. If you would like to apply to be a parole advocate with Prepare, we suggest you first take a look at our website and familiarise yourself with the curriculum. Under the Volunteers tab of the website, there is a form to apply to be a parole advocate. There is also a form to use if you are a family member or friend of an incarcerated person and you are looking for support in helping them make their best case for parole. Also under that tab, there is a form which can be printed out and sent to an incarcerated person who wishes to apply via snail mail for a parole advocate. Imagine a world in which every incarcerated person has a fellow citizen working with them to prepare for parole and reentry. Imagine it and then help make it manifest.